You didn't fall for the person. You fell for the future they described. The trips you were going to take. The life you were going to build. The version of them that only existed in promises, not in reality. And the strangest part? It all felt real. Not because it was true, but because it was detailed, specific, convincing enough to make you emotionally invest in something that hadn't even happened yet. You remember the words. Just wait. Everything's going to be different soon. We're going to fix this. I see a future with you. And somehow, those words kept you there longer than you should have stayed, even when their actions didn't match, even when the present felt confusing, even when something inside you quietly whispered, this isn't adding up. Because hope, when it's painted vividly enough, can override logic, and that's exactly where the trap is set. Today you're going to understand a pattern most people experience, but rarely recognize in time. A pattern where the future is used as a tool, not a promise. And once you see it, you won't hear those words the same way again. Before we go deeper, I want to be clear. Everything discussed on this channel is strictly for educational purposes. Understanding dark psychology is about building awareness, not weaponizing it. If you or someone you know is in a harmful situation, please seek support from a licensed professional. This is a space for growth, clarity, and protection, nothing else. This pattern is called future faking. At its core, future faking is simple. Someone makes promises about the future without any real intention of following through. But here's what makes it powerful and dangerous. It's not just about lying. It's about creating emotional investment in a future that doesn't exist. Imagine this. You're in a relationship that feels uncertain. There are mixed signals, inconsistencies, maybe even moments where you feel like you're the only one trying. And just when you start to question things, they say something like, once things settle down, I'm going to give you everything you deserve. We're going to move in together. I want a life with you, just trust me. And suddenly, the doubt fades. Not because anything changed, but because of what might change. Future faking works because it shifts your focus away from the present and locks your attention onto potential. And once you're emotionally invested in that potential, it becomes harder to walk away. Because now leaving doesn't just mean losing what you have, it means losing what you were promised. Layer 1, the illusion of certainty. Future faking begins with certainty. Not vague statements, but confident, detailed visions of what's coming next. I'm going to marry you. We'll travel together next year. I'm building something for us. These statements create a sense of security. They give you something to hold on to, something that feels stable, even when the present isn't. But here's the reality. Words are cheap. Certainty is easy to fake. In one example, someone stays in a relationship for years, holding on to promises of commitment that never materialize. Every time they bring up concerns, they're reassured with future plans, plans that are always just out of reach. And over time, something subtle happens. They stop evaluating the relationship based on what is, and start judging it based on what could be. This matters because it disconnects you from reality. And once you lose that connection, you become easier to control. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Layer 2, emotional investment through delay. Future faking isn't just about promises, it's about timing. Notice when these promises appear. Right when you're about to leave. Right when you start questioning things. Right when your emotional tolerance reaches its limit. That's not coincidence. That's strategy. The promise acts as a reset button. It gives you just enough hope to stay. Just a little longer. In another example, someone repeatedly postpones important milestones, meeting family, making commitments, defining the relationship. But every delay is accompanied by reassurance. Not yet, but soon. I just need more time. Trust me, it's coming. And so you wait. Not because the present is fulfilling, but because the future feels close enough to reach. This creates a cycle. Disappointment, followed by promise. Doubt, followed by reassurance. Distance, followed by emotional pull. And the longer this cycle continues, the harder it becomes to break free. Because now you're not just invested in the person, you're invested in the time you've already given. Most people stop here, but you need to know the next layer. Layer 3, the emotional aftermath. The most damaging part of future faking isn't the broken promise. It's what happens inside you afterward. Confusion, self-doubt, a lingering question. Was it real? Or did I imagine it? Because when someone consistently paints a future with you, it feels intentional. It feels meaningful. So when it doesn't happen, your mind tries to make sense of it. Maybe they were just going through something. Maybe you expected too much. Maybe if you had been more patient. And that's where the real damage occurs. You start questioning yourself, instead of questioning the pattern. In one scenario, someone walks away from a long cycle of empty promises, only to find themselves struggling to trust again. Not just others, but their own judgment, because they believed something that felt real, and that belief, once broken, doesn't disappear easily. This matters because future faking doesn't just waste time. It rewires how you interpret trust, commitment, and intention. And if you don't recognize it, you risk repeating it. Here's the truth most people never realize. Future faking isn't always intentional deception. Sometimes, the person making the promises believes them in the moment. They feel the emotion. They imagine the future. They speak from a version of themselves that exists only temporarily. But intention doesn't change impact. Whether it's deliberate or not, the result is the same. You're left holding on to something that was never grounded in consistent action. And this is where the real shift happens. You stop asking, did they mean it? And start asking, did their actions support it? Because meaning something in a moment is not the same as committing to it over time. This reframes everything. It's not about whether the promise sounded sincere. It's about whether it was backed by behavior. And once you understand that, you stop being persuaded by words alone. You start paying attention to patterns, consistency, follow-through, alignment between what's said and what's done. And suddenly, future faking loses its power, because it only works when you believe potential is enough. The first strategy is this: observe patterns, not promises. Anyone can describe a future. What matters is whether their present actions align with it. If someone consistently talks about what's coming next but fails to follow through, recognize the pattern instead of holding on to the promise. The second strategy is set time-based awareness. When you hear repeated soon or later, start paying attention to how often those timelines shift. Delayed action is often a signal. Protect yourself by noticing when progress is always postponed but never realized. The third strategy is stay anchored in the present. Ask yourself a simple question. If nothing changed from this moment forward, would I stay? This keeps your decisions grounded in reality, not in imagined outcomes. The fourth strategy is trust behavior over emotion. Words can feel convincing, especially when they're emotionally charged. But real commitment shows up in consistent effort, not occasional reassurance. Let actions define your understanding, not temporary feelings. These strategies are not about becoming guarded or closed off. They're about staying aware, because awareness is what breaks the cycle. Think about a time when someone promised you a future that never